So welcome to our first ever motorcycle review here at ProductReview.com.au. My name's Cameron and welcome to a review that is around a learner bike, because I myself have been graduating through my license over the past couple of years and I have a few months left until I can get onto my fulls. That's how things work here in Australia. I've been reviewing cars longer than I've been riding motorbikes, so I thought it'd be a good time to merge the two and actually start riding some things on camera and let you know if they're worth buying. Now, learners here in Australia and provisional riders can only ride certain types of bikes, so manufacturers build LAMS approved bikes, which are basically designed to be able to be approachable, friendly, easy to ride, and also relatively safe because they don't have a tremendous amount of power. So Yamaha have kindly lent me the YZF-R3, which is one of their entry-level super sport bikes, but it sits in between the 600cc ones and the single-cylinder smaller siblings. Now I'm going to walk you around the features and take it for a ride to let you know if it's worth buying as a brand new learner's bike. Now, pricing for the R3 starts from $8,199 right away, and the only thing you really have to choose is the paint. You have Yamaha's Icon Blue, which is its most distinct color. Then you have Midnight Black, and then you have this vivid orange, and it's reminiscent of another brand, but I won't say what that is. So as far as pricing goes for a brand new bike like this, it's actually pretty good. Now, what do you get for that price? Well, let me show you from front to back, starting with the tires. We get some Dunlop tires, and they're a bit more meaty than its single-cylinder younger sibling, so it looks a bit better than some of those bikes. Now, you've also got your upside-down forks, which are built by KYB, and they've also got some nice gold finish on them, and they just look fantastic, and we'll see how they ride in just a bit. And then there's one large drilled disc brake up front, which is, you know, a nice size for stopping, and then we have some multi-spoke dark wheels both front and back. Now let's talk fairings. It's all made out of plastic predominantly. There are some metal parts lower down, but this is all a good thing for learner riders because these are cheaper to replace if you do break them than metal parts, and they also help with aerodynamics. Yamaha claims that this aerodynamics finish on this bike, which goes all around underneath, in front and along the side, helps increase the top speed of this bike by 8 kilometers an hour. Now, as a learner, you probably shouldn't be testing it out because your max speed's around 100 kilometers an hour. But if you go to a track day, that will help. But that aerodynamics also helps when you're out on the highway, which again, we'll find out in just a bit. Now, the mirrors sit here up on near the windshield, and this windshield's nice and large so you can tuck down to get nice and aerodynamic when you're out on the highway to allow that airflow to go over the top of you. And then your mirrors up here fold in nicely. You don't have to adjust them to fold them in, which I like quite a lot. They snap out into place and then tuck away when you need them to. I do like the handlebar placement as well. It is a nice tucked in design, but it's not too aggressive. So it's a nice in between from something feeling like a very track focused super sport into something that's a bit more easy to ride day to day. And in terms of your controls out here, it's very simple. There's horns, lights, brights, indicators. You even have a hazard button as well, which is quite good to have. And you have some nice long brake and clutch controls up front, and all the wiring's tucked nicely close to the bike so it's not sprawled out all over the place. Now, I do like the venting as well around the Yamaha badge, and you also have another Yamaha logo down below, which is reflective and it looks quite cool. Some more decals as well around the front on the tank, and then you even have some along the side, and then you have your R3, you know, stickering there as well. And then speaking of the indicators, they stick out a little bit from the side, but they are sort of dampened very nicely. So if someone brushes past it or you accidentally drop this bike, these shouldn't snap off. They should just bend out of the way, and then you bring the bike up or you come back to your bike and your indicators are still going to be there. Now, the seat height is less than 800 millimeters, so it means it's easy to get on and off even if you're a bit shorter, so it just makes sure that it's just easy and accessible for a range of riders. And then you also have some nice metal finishes down here. I like how Yamaha stamped down here on this casing, and everything just looks nicely put together rather than looking like a cheap knockoff of its proper supersport bikes. And so the heart of the R3 is a 321cc parallel twin motor, and it's got aluminium pistons and aluminium cylinders to help reduce weight, and it also acts as a stressed member here in the frame of the bike to help with rigidity. I also like the exhaust finish here. It's nice and tucked in, and yes, very reminiscent of the biggest superbikes that Yamaha makes. They're really making sure that this bike fits in the family and not just some cheaper learner approved outcast. It really is a proper Yamaha bike. And then talking about this back seat, it's got a little strap there so you can tuck items underneath. Very handy. Some bikes don't really come with that, and it's just nice to have that option there. And then this seat actually pops off. There's a little lock that just comes undone. All you need is the key that starts the bike, and this just pulls away. And underneath you have your toolkit, which is very useful to have, and a tiny area to store some small items. And it's just nice that this is so easily accessible, but it is a tiny bit harder to put back on. But once you do, just clicks into place just like that. And overall, I'm a big fan of attention to detail, and I think Yamaha have done a good job here, especially with how clean the underside of this bike is, considering that the oil filter is tucked away but still easily accessible and something that can't easily be knocked. And so when you start up the bike, you've got your digital display here, and I like the startup animation. It's actually something that's interesting to look at. And then you have all the information you might possibly need. Here on the side, you have your little lights for your indicators, neutral, and any other sorts of warnings. But what I like is how easy the revs are to read across the top, a nice digital speedometer, and you've also got a gear indicator, and you even have a fuel gauge. Why I'm pointing that out is because some brand new bikes don't even come with that, and bikes that are nearly double the price of this one. You got your time at the bottom left, and then you have this little button which is very easy to press even when wearing gloves, and you can go through a bunch of trip information down on the bottom right. Stuff like fuel, trip information, and you've also got your odometer and how far you've traveled. So that's quite handy to have. So it's a very useful gauge cluster that's even dampened so it doesn't vibrate all that much when you're even getting on it. So now it's time to ride this thing. I've ridden a few bikes before. I've even got my personal bike to use as a benchmark for how a learner bike should ride. And I'm interested to see how approachable this bike is, and if it's going to be a lot of fun to ride or simply just looks good. So let's get on with it. So riding the Yamaha YZF-R3 is a ton of fun. It's so easy to jump onto and just get riding. What I immediately loved was the weight and ergonomics of this riding experience. I could just jump on and get riding without feeling uncomfortable. I'm 5'11" and I'm not exactly that tall, but I'm also not super short. So it's going to be good for a range of riders, but I don't think anyone really much taller than 6'2" will feel super comfortable on it, because that's when it will feel a bit small. But anyone below that will have a pretty good time jumping on and off this bike thanks to that lower seating position. Riding this thing around was just a ton of fun. Yes, again, that twin cylinder engine, super responsive, and what I really loved is that it actually was pretty good low down. Low down power was never an issue, although I did have to rev it out just a little bit more than my Ducati Monster, which has a bit more torque thanks to a larger capacity motor, but it still did a really good job of just moving its weight. And then when you really want to get on it, get that throttle down wide open, it is a ton of fun to rev all the way to redline. This thing is something that you can commute on day to day, and I found it very comfortable. It was really easy to get a comfortable riding position. Even out on the highway, you can tuck down beneath that windshield at the front just to get out of the wind, and then if you want to sit more upright in slower moving traffic, it's easy enough to do that. Now this bike is pretty light, so it doesn't need a beefy set of brakes, and they do a good job. They're nice and responsive both on the front and the rear, and it's really easy to control this bike and come to a smooth stop. That suspension setup on this bike is actually pretty soft. I didn't really think it was all that harsh to ride on, but it also meant it was pretty good in corners, but it was forgiving over some rough bits of tarmac. So this thing, even though if it hit a pothole, wouldn't throw you off. It's really quite comfortable to ride and quite approachable as a first-time rider. Now, compared to a bigger motorcycle, the YZF-R3 is really good to learn and hone your skills on. Going through corners and sweeping back roads and finding those roads that are fun to ride, this bike does a fantastic job of sort of encouraging you to explore the limits of the bike, but all while feeling quite in control and feeling quite safe. It feels like a great bike that would also be something that you could take to your first ever track day and really learn to hone your riding skills on. A lot more approachable than some bigger learner bikes that have 600cc motors and are a lot more heavy. Those can feel a bit daunting and might not actually encourage you to ride as aggressively as the YZF might teach you. So I really like that bike for that reason. Now, I don't necessarily think this needs an exhaust system. I'm sure someone out there will want to throw a slip-on this thing straight away, but it's provided a pretty good sound. I love the overrun burbles that you get every so often. The way this thing revs out is very reminiscent of a MotoGP bike, but with a smaller capacity motor, of course. This thing is really quite fun and just gives you that good feeling when you ride the bike. You don't feel bad riding it, you don't feel scared of it. It's something that's very approachable, very comfortable for a learner rider to jump onto. Looks great, rides really well, sounds good. Also twin cylinders, a lot more fun than a single cylinder in my opinion. And just the overall packaging in terms of the display, and also the fact this bike is pretty fuel efficient if you're not actually riding it that hard. And it's just an overall really pleasant riding experience. And I think this makes for a very good first bike in that regard. Alrighty, so the ultimate question is, should you buy one of these? And so ultimately, yes, it is a very excellent learner's bike. Now, for someone who's had an affinity for Italian bikes instead and likes the sound of a 600cc motor and isn't really a fan of supersport bikes, this is one of those bikes that's shown me the light and actually is converting me to liking these quite a lot. Now, I've had a go in a KTM RC390 and I wasn't the biggest fan of that riding dynamic. It was just a little bit aggressive for someone like me who is still learning how to ride. Now, what I appreciate with this Yamaha a lot more is the fact it's so much more approachable as a supersport, but still looks fantastic and is something that is a good lean into the more aggressive supersport style of riding. And so if you're looking for a nice in-between in terms of price and power, the R3 is one of those that have really impressed me in that regard. And also, as a brand new bike, you have your warranty and servicing, all that sorted out, and it's a lot better than buying a used bike in some instances. Ask me how I know. Now, this has been an excellent taste into what Yamaha makes, and they do make some excellent bikes, but this introductory supersport bike is one of those that's just really impressed me, and I would think I would buy this over a KTM RC390, and I may be offending plenty of those that have one at the moment, but I guess I'll have to ride the latest generation of RC390 to really make that decision. This bike does all the small things so well that it's very easy to live with, and something that once you get a bit of sun and it's not raining, it's a great day out. Now, thank you so much for watching our first ever bike review. Please let me know what you think down below, and I want to know if you want to see more of these. If you do, hit that like button, and if you want to see more new bike and car reviews, make sure you hit that big subscribe button down below because that helps support the channel. Now, thank you so much for watching. My name's Cameron, and I'll see you in the next one.